Hello and welcome. My name is Rohit Sawhney. I'm a group product manager on the cloud security team here at Cisco. And this is networking and building relationships. What we often do is what holds us back, so learn to help others and they will help you. I'm honored to be here today at the Master Series studio to talk with you about this topic. Now you might think to yourself, how did you get this topic, Rohit? Why are you presenting this life skill? And the fact is, I didn't expect to be presenting on this topic. The thing is, a few months back, I did a survey of our engineers in the group that I work in Silicon Valley, and I asked, what sort of topics would you like to listen to? And surprisingly, this topic was number one on most engineers' lists, networking and building relationships. And I thought to myself, I didn't realize that would be so important, but it makes sense. A lot of the opportunities that I've been privileged to have come from networking opportunities and building relationships. And it's not always easy for everyone to do that. So it makes sense to spend time on it. In the next 45 minutes or so, we will go through some tips that I have around networking and building relationships, around mindset, around approach, around the fact that it doesn't have to be so hard if you think about it in a different way. I'll also have the opportunity to have my colleague join me, and we'll do a little role play so we can practice what we actually preach. So with that, let's start with perceptions. Here's a few perceptions that people have in general about networking and building relationships. And as you can see, they run the gamut of it seems hard or forced to maybe it's for certain people, not necessarily for myself. Maybe for myself, it's not the right time yet because I don't have much to offer. Or, no, I'm good. I already have a social network, I have relationships, and I don't think I need to invest more time into that. I'm just going to do my work. All of these things are valid. I myself have thought about a lot of these over the years. And I think to myself, well, yeah, I don't need to attend that event, or I don't need to go there and mingle or speak to these people. There's nothing for me to learn, or I have nothing to offer. And ultimately, that's not always the right way to think about things. We all have something to offer, we all have value, and if we connect with people, it's not necessarily about us receiving something back, it's about giving, and it's about how we can make a meaningful relationship. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about why this topic is even important, how to network a little bit better, some frameworks around networking, the fact that you can think about it slightly differently, farming, not hunting, and then we'll go into role play, where my colleague will join me, and we'll do some sample scripting and role play exercises that perhaps you can also use and practice for yourself, and we'll wrap up. I would love for you to continue the conversation with me on Twitter or reach out to me. I'm happy to engage, and we'll see where the conversation goes. So let's start. Networking is like vegetables. You know it's good for you, but you still don't do it regularly. I'm not sure if a banana qualifies as a vegetable per se, but I figured I'd squeeze a cat video into our presentation here just to make things a little bit more lighthearted. The point here, however, is that we all know that it's important, but we don't always emphasize it or spend enough time on it. And like many things in life, you need to practice it before it becomes a habit. There's a lot of sayings that relate to networking, and these are a few of them. Your network is your net worth. Or conversely, if you're not networking, you're not working. Now, to some of us, this may seem a little extreme. For example, we've studied hard, we've worked to get to a certain point, and we figure that our work will produce results. We put our heads down, we do good things, and people will notice. And in general, that is true, and you hope that to be the case. However, at the same time, if you build relationships where people notice you, and they form a bond, those people will naturally come to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about this person, we've collaborated, we've spent time outside of work, or in some other context, and you came to mind, and this opportunity comes to mind, would you be interested? That's where you get into stories and relationships. And that really does matter at the end of the day. Think about the people that you know. As they've elevated, as they've had mentorship opportunities, how has that developed? Do they have a personal connection with that individual that they work with? Did they follow that individual from one company to another? Chances are there are a lot of yeses to those questions that I'm asking. And the fact is that that is important at the end of the day. And you can take this out of the work context to other opportunities. You're entering a school, you're changing careers, you are transitioning in life in some way or another. If someone can help you, that's typically a good thing. Granted, there are a lot of recommendations out there, a lot of things that we can search for online, but who do you really trust? You want to trust someone that you have a relationship with, and ultimately that does make a difference in terms of the opportunities that you have, the sort of things that you now get exposed to that you may not know otherwise. So here's what we often do. A lot of us are guilty of going to events and conferences. We're at a conference right now at Cisco Live in Barcelona. It's a wonderful conference. It's an opportunity to network and build relationships, but sometimes we just focus on what we want to do, get in, get out. If we spend enough time online, we think that we build quote unquote connections. Are they really connections? I would ask you to ask yourself if you really have a relationship with those connections or not. In some cases, it is valid. I've been in situations where I've had colleagues I've connected with, we've had human connections. I reach out to them many years later, they will respond right away, and that's a wonderful thing to see. But that doesn't always happen, and we have tons of connections that have no meaning or backing behind them. At the same time, we read a lot about networking, and we think we know what to do, what script makes sense that will bring us forward. But oftentimes we come across looking like this cartoon in the next slide. I'll read it out for us. Would you mind if I network with you to help my career? I would have said yes, but you made it feel all weird and creepy. Perhaps you could send me an email that I won't read. That makes you my best friend. Now, think about this. Can you relate? Have you done this before? Do you know someone who's done this? Perhaps we've done it ourselves, and it's okay. I've been there, probably early in my career, where I forced the situation, and it seems like I'm coming across looking for something. That's not necessarily genuine, and people understand that, and as such, they may say what they're saying here in this cartoon. So how do you make it more authentic? How do you bring it forward? Let's talk a little bit about that. This example that I'm citing really has no purpose nor intention, but all of us are guilty in trying to do this to advance our careers. Let's talk about what holds us back. And this comes from a wonderful article that I read called The Networking Advice That No One Tells You. And it's a framework that we can use. First and foremost, it's our mindset. For many of you who are familiar with growth versus fixed mindset, this is something that relates. A fixed mindset tells us that we're not good at something, right? We're just not good at networking, we're not good at human connections or building relationships, and so we won't do it. And that is very fixed in its approach. But if we think outside of that, and we have a growth mindset where we say we're just not good at it yet, but if we invest the time and we put in the energy, it will reap the rewards, and you'll get better little by little. So mindset has a lot to do with it, and we'll talk more about that as we go throughout this presentation. We often are also guilty of limiting our network. Think about the people you know, the people you sit down with perhaps at lunch or in the outside work environments that you have. Are they similar to you? Do they come from a different background or a similar background? Many times we gravitate towards the people that we already know. They're very similar to us, went to the same schools, have the same background, same ethnicities. And that does ultimately limit us. We are also not always strategic, right? We may not be thinking about where we want to go, we may just be thinking about where we are today. And that doesn't always serve a lot of purpose. The next two I think of kind of part and parcel. We aren't always proactive, nor do we schedule time to network. If you will join me for other talks I'll do this week around self-care and conversation, this theme comes up again and again. We don't always take time for ourselves. And so this is something to think about. If you schedule time to say, I'm going to network or build relationships, this reaps a lot of rewards. An example that I can tell you about is managing by walking around. For those of us who have led teams in the past, there's this concept of managing by walking around. Putting down your laptop, walking around the office, and just talking to people. Hey, what are you working on? What do you need help with? Can I help you in some way? Oh, that's interesting. Why? Tell me a little bit about that. There's a ton that you can learn from those experiences. So we aren't always proactive in doing that. We don't schedule time to do it. But simply just scheduling time in your calendar to say, okay, I'm going to stop, grab a coffee or tea, and go and talk to people or have lunch with someone and make it purposeful, that reaps a lot of rewards. And finally, we don't always leverage our existing relationships. Believe it or not, we do go to the people that we know, but we don't always think back on all the relationships we've had in our life. We may think of current, but not the past. We may think about our extended network. Perhaps you have kids and you have a school community. These are existing relationships. We don't always take the time to develop or foster those relationships. There's a ton you can do there if you really think about it and purposely think about the circles in your life. We'll come back to this towards the end as well. So some how-to guidelines. Start with your career goals. I touched on this earlier. Look ahead. Where do you want to be in the future? Whom do you want to begin to learn from now? Today, I'm in product management. I may want to go to a career in product marketing. I may want to go down the sales route. Should I connect with those people, learn from those experiences that they've had and how they perhaps transition from one to the other? That makes sense. Later on, I'll talk about my own journey into product management and how it took me quite some time to develop that and a lot of failures that came along the way. It would have been intentional if I started to learn from those people and learn how they transition in their careers early on. Also, know your value proposition. When we talk about our script later, we'll talk about the fact that we all have value. Don't just think about what you do, but how that relates to business outcomes. I work as an engineer, but that helps this product achieve this growth or helps my customers be more loyal or solve their problems. All of us, to some extent, have some credibility and influence, but we don't do a great job in marketing that. And I'm going to try to help you with that today. We will help you with that today in our scripting. And finally, and this is probably the most important thing, if you think about networking from building mutually beneficial relationships, you will go a lot farther. It's about you helping people and people helping you. So some tips around networking and conversation starters. You go into an event, and sometimes we just kind of go straight into, what do you do? What are you working on? And that's great. But we don't always ask the open-ended questions around, what are your challenges? What do you need help with? The fact is, many people want to be heard. They aren't often heard. They're talked over. If you can help people by just listening to them and being open to their ideas, that helps create a bond. Some of the best conversations I've had is where I'm actually not speaking. I'm there to just listen. Whether it be with my partner or with an extended friend, sometimes they just want to get something off their chest. They want to vent. And the best thing you can do is listen to them, and they may think that's the best conversation they've had because for the first time in perhaps a long time, someone actually listened to them. They were curious about what they're interested in and what is bothering them or what their challenges are. So what are the 5 B's of networking? Start by being likable, right? Say something interesting about yourself. When we go through our script later, we'll do this. We won't just talk about what we do and the value, we'll make it a little bit personal. And that way you get multiple connection points between you and the individual you're speaking to. Perhaps what you're doing is just boring to them, but something you say about your kids, about the school, about where you grow up, may resonate, and that might be a conversation starter. You'll be amazed how that can take on legs of its own. You also want to be brief. People don't want to know all the details about when you did something in June of 2019 and what date you did it in. They just want the essence of what you're saying. So it's important to be brief. You also want to be social. Show interest in others, right? This goes back to what I was saying earlier. And most people don't want to just hear about someone venting or complaining. They want positivity in their life. They want something that makes them happy, that takes their mind off some stressful situation. Gratitude has a lot to do with that. How you can introduce having that attitude of gratitude and being thankful for what you have really goes a long way to positivity, and people they latch on to that at the end of the day. So some other how-to guidelines. Find allies and champions. When you effectively network and build relationships, you will find that the people that you've built relationships will come to you unsolicited. My partner, my wife, has done this very well, and I credit her and I learn from her every day. She has people that she has built relationships in a short period of time. They come back to her and say, hey, we think you'd be great for this opportunity. We thought of you. Why not bring it forward? And that has led to lots of nonprofit board relationships that she's had that she would not have otherwise. That's just a simple example of how people can come back to you and think of you and be your champions even when you're not in the room. Also, going back to being strategic, you want to be thoughtful, ease your way in. And so with that in mind, let's talk about these guidelines. You can't start at an accelerated front and do this every day in and day out. Depending on where you live in the world, you may have that opportunity. For those of us who live in Silicon Valley like myself, I tell people all the time, if I wanted to go to a product management or an engineering, a technical cloud security event, I could probably do that every day of the week, twice a week. Or every day of the week, twice a day. However, that is not what I want to do. I want to balance my life. So start a little bit slower. Start with perhaps once a month. Transition that to a couple times in a month, or maybe a couple times in a week. Take the lunch break, take the coffee break, go to an event like a happy hour and make that purposeful and just connect with someone that you didn't know otherwise, and that will make you feel good. Go with that purpose and intention, and go with an open mind to learn and be amazed by others. One of my favorite authors is James CLEUR. He's not only an author of a great book called Atomic Habits, but also a blogger that I follow. And one of his quotes is, "Focus is the art of knowing what to ignore." You can't do it all. You can't connect with everyone. So focus on what you want to do there. And even if you make one connection in the span of a given time, you're moving forward. You're getting better every day. Another way to think about networking is that it's not about collecting contacts. In my earlier days, I would have been satisfied with going to a conference like this and just connecting with people, picking up business cards, or connecting on LinkedIn and being happy about that. Hey, I got 50 connections or 40 connections, and now that's going to result in something. The fact is, it's probably not. But if it's about planting relations, right, about seeding, and you think about it from that perspective, a lot more can happen. So let's talk about a script that we can use. And this is a script that I just made up, frankly. But your intro could be the who, what, and why. What is the impact you're making? And focus on making it very personal and positive. In talking to my youngest daughter once about something that she was doing, I think it was probably around reading or writing, I made this comment one time and I said, "Hey, Rhea, doesn't practice make perfect?" And she said, "No, Papa. My teacher, Ms. Nakamura, said, practice makes progress." And so that's something I mentioned here, because really, it's about trying it, not getting it right away. You can't be perfect. You fail, you learn from it and iterate, and you try again. It's a very product philosophy, a very agile and engineering philosophy that many of us have in this community, but it's something you can adopt to this as well. So let's go about and try that now. I would like to introduce my colleague, Pallavi Priya, who's going to be joining me for a few minutes to talk through this. Pallavi, how are you?
Hi, Rahul.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we've done this before, but we wanted to practice this script. And what I thought we'd do is let's go through this script and practice it for our audience so they can see how it's like. Hopefully at home or wherever they're listening, they can take this forward as well and practice it on their own. So I'd love if you start maybe in, say, 30 seconds and try this like you and I met for the first time and you're introducing yourself. And then I'll do that myself as well.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pallavi Priya. I'm a software engineer in Cisco's cloud security business group, particularly the umbrella product. I'm a part of Cisco's cloud delivered firewall team. And I write code that develops applications that support Cisco customers in protecting their data on public cloud. I care about writing good quality code and solving customers' challenges. Outside of work, I really love to spend time in nature. That's how I get energized, and that's how I practice my mindfulness.
Wonderful. Excellent. So I love that because you told me a lot in that statement. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I'll now go and introduce myself to you like we met for the first time. So hi, Pallavi. I'm Rohit Sawhney. I work in product management on the cloud security team within Cisco, part of the security business group. I focus on DNS security, domain name system security, which helps customers on and off their network to be protected. It's a large business for Cisco that continues to grow in the cloud space, and we have over 90 million daily active users across 20,000 enterprise customers in the world. I focus on this because it really solves problems for our customers and keeps them and their customers safe online. Outside of work, I really enjoy spending time with my family. I have 2 daughters who are 8 and 11, and I love to coach them in a variety of sports like softball and soccer. I feel that sports teaches you a lot about life and teamwork, and so I want to really foster that in their lives as well.
Good.
All right. So if you notice, we did that in roughly around 20 to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, if we think about the opportunities we have with people, we may not have the luxury of doing the sort of script. It may come
Right.
across rehearsed.
Yeah.
Like as I was listening to you, it may sound a little bit rehearsed as well. And sometimes people don't have the patience for this, or you're in a group setting. So one of the things we think about is kind of like the Jesse Owens quote here, one chance is all you need, and sometimes one chance is all you get. You know, one shot in life to make a good impression. So let's try the same thing that we tried, but let's do it even faster. Suppose
Okay.
we're in a group setting around a table or talking in a networking event and we're introducing each other around a circle. Sometimes you only get 10, 15 seconds. So let's try to do the same thing in a shorter period of time.
Okay.
Why don't you try?
Sure. Hi, my name is Pallavi Priya. I'm a software engineer in Cisco's cloud security group. I write code that helps customers protect their data on public cloud. Outside of work, I love spending time in the nature. That's how I energize myself. Thank you.
Excellent, very good. Short and to the point. I'll try as well.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Rohit Sawhney. I work in product management in the cloud security team within Cisco. We focus on DNS security and protecting users on and off the network. Outside of work, I love spending time with my family and my 2 girls, and I coach them a variety of different sports, and I love what that teaches them about life and teamwork.
Good.
Right? So hopefully as you think about this, you're thinking about how that relates to you. And so Pallavi, one of the things I really loved about what you said is you really related that to value. Like you want to write good code and you care about that and what that brings to the table and really what that brings to the overall organization. Now you and I have talked about networking before, and I think you had an interesting perspective on maybe the negative connotations that come with networking. Can you tell us a little
Right.
bit more about that?
Yeah. So somehow the word networking itself gives a negative connotation. And when I go to a networking event, I like to make connections rather than adding up networks in my LinkedIn, as you mentioned in one of the earlier slides.
Yes.
So I care about connecting with people, developing meaningful relationships rather than just networking someone for the sake of having a new contact.
So would you say you'd rather not, if you could, you would rather not use the word networking and just say connections?
Yeah, connection sounds much more friendly.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it is really about those connections that we're making. I'm very privy to the fact, or partial to the fact, that it's a human connection, because I think you get a lot more from that face-to-face with someone.
Right.
Certainly you can do that online, and sometimes you don't have the luxury of meeting someone face-to-face until maybe months or years later.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy that as well. So that's a good way to think about it, is maybe I'll just change the title of the slide set in the future to Making Connections in Human Relationships instead of networking. So with that, I wanted to close with a few different thoughts. One of the quotes that I really love from Reid Hoffman, who you may know as a founder, is around this. Your network is the people who want to help you, and you want to help them, and that's really powerful. We started with that a little bit earlier, if you notice in my byline for this talk. And why that really hits home from what Reid Hoffman says is he's not talking about networking, he's just talking about going out there unsolicited and helping someone. If you think back to what I stated earlier in terms of the script, you can ask these open-ended questions around, what are your challenges? What do you need help with? Can I help you? Many people have started their careers by just volunteering their time, perhaps even for free, and interning somewhere and having a conversation. It also makes me think about something that I heard very recently. As I was traveling over to Cisco Live Barcelona, I happened to listen to a podcast on the flight over. And this podcast was by a gentleman named Dave Evans, who is famous for design thinking. He actually wrote a book around designing your life. from Stanford and design thinking, and he said that when you have these relationships and conversations, don't go in there thinking that you want a job. If you think about asking for a job, most people don't have a job. Actually, he had this very brilliant stat. He said 4 out of 5 jobs are actually not listed. So if you apply for every job out there, you probably miss 80% of them. But if you ask for the story, what's the problem you have? What's your story? People have stories. People are willing to share stories and get that off your chest. And if you can collaborate with them and talk through that with them, that really resonates. Now, if I think about my career, in the last 10 years that I've been in product management, the 4 or 5 positions I've had across a variety of companies, including my journey into Cisco, came from relationships, came from sitting down and talking to people. My last one, as I was brought into Cisco, was a coffee conversation with someone in the Bay Area about something completely different. We were not there to talk about work, we were there to talk about a different subject. And he said, hey Rohit, I noticed that you spent some time in product management and cloud security. Would you be interested in X? And that X resulted in a conversation and another conversation, and it goes on and on. Now, the individual that brought me in to Cisco, who was in that conversation with me over coffee, happened to leave Cisco. What happened? I introduced them to someone I knew early on, and now they're helping run that company in a senior leadership role. Another individual here at Cisco, who has since moved on, is looking for my recommendation for another position that they want to enter into. So we're continuing to help each other, and that really is a beautiful thing. If you think about it, it's just relationships that foster over and over again. So in reality, when we think about networking and building relationships, it really should feel like this. It should not feel forced. It should not feel like just a bunch of connections that you're collecting. It's where both parties benefit, where you get really what you give. As it relates to many things in life, you're connecting those dots, and really it does take a village. If you build your village, as I'll talk about in the next slide, it really helps to bring that back to you, and people will ultimately help you. Ultimately, you also have to work for it more than you hope for it. You can't hope that the next opportunity will come around. You have to put some intention into it and give of yourself. But once you do that, it's very important. And the other important item here that I underline is never dismiss anyone as unimportant. I talk about this a lot, especially in the area that we live in the world, in the Bay Area. This is very true. You just never know who you're going to run into, and what the optics of what someone may look like is not in reality who they are, right? They may look very simple, very humble. I've met a ton of people in my life that are very down to earth, and you have no idea that they're running multi-million-dollar companies or doing all sorts of things. And so you want to treat everyone as important as a human being and make a connection, and you never know where that will lead to. Never judge someone. So my call to action here for all of us is to consider your network. Consider your friends, whether they be your current or your past, and a lot can come from that. Consider your circles. I talk about circles from the standpoint of your interests, your hobbies, maybe even your religion, right? If you have kids, you have a school network. If you participate in sports, Pallavi talked to us about hiking. She might have a hiking group. That is a group of friends, and it's a circle that she has. That circle may intersect with some friends she has from where she grew up, to other things that she practices in life. These are all circles that connect. Imagine a Venn diagram that intersect. And so these are all the circles that you can consider when you think about opportunities. And if you think about it from that standpoint, it's really your village, your extended network that can help you, and you can help them. If you happen to be an employee within Cisco, think about employee resource groups or employee resource organizations. There are a ton of them out there, and these are connection points. If you're new to an organization, new to an area, that might be something that really helps bring you in. It's a safe ground where you can meet people of like-minded interest, and that helps form your circles over time. Outside of Cisco, you may have opportunities like that as well in the organization you're part of, or use the platforms that are out there. Meetup.com is a great one. There are a ton of circles through your alumni networks, to schools you've been to, through just your friends, where you can connect with people. But I really encourage you to reach out, meet up, and have a face-to-face conversation with someone. So with that, I'll wrap up by saying something that really I learned some time back. When I was younger, I was encouraged by my mom to ask questions. And frankly, when I was in my, say, early teens, I wouldn't do this naturally, right? I would meet family members in different parts of the world as we travel, and my mom would say, Rohit, why didn't you ask them any questions? Why didn't you ask them where they work, what factory they're in, what are they doing? And I said, I don't know, I was just shy. And it took some time for this to resonate, but at some point, something clicked. And I was like, yeah, I do want to learn from people. When I think of events that I go to now, I'm typically thinking of, do I have an opportunity to learn from someone? Is there something I'm going to take away? And so even with my girls today, who are 8 and 11 respectively, this quote is something that I use often with them. I try to encourage them by saying, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. If you want to do something, ask me, ask your mom, ask your grandparents, and take the initiative to state that, whatever's on your mind. What's the worst that can happen, right? We say no, but at least you asked. The best that could happen is we say yes, or hey, that's a good idea. That's something I didn't even consider. So I mentioned that to all of you because as you think about opportunities that you have, people you can connect with, think about that. If you don't ever ask them and step up and say something, the answer is going to be no. It's a shut door. But if you take the opportunity to talk to people, they may want to reciprocate. They may want to be your mentor. They may want to open up your doors. People want to help people. In earnest, there are a lot of good people out there. And so take that opportunity to overcome your fears, have the courage to ask these questions. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening. I'd like to thank the Cisco Master Series studio and team here for hosting us here today. And ultimately, thank you for the opportunity to share this time with you. Please go out and make it happen. Thank you.